IVM.
Hello and welcome to the Habit Coach Podcast, the bite-sized podcast filled with quick and easy, actionable habits. Remember, great habits create that awesome life. I am Ashdin, Doctor, your habit coach. And today's fun fact of the day has to do with empathy. Did you know that there are 5 or more kinds of empathy? We normally just hear the word empathy being thrown around. However, there are many nuances to the kinds of empathies that exist. An important habit is to learn what kind of empathy to use when. Empathy is described as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. This definition itself has such an interesting point of view. Understanding someone's feelings means that you understand what they are going through and where they are coming from. Sharing means that a part of that feeling now resides in you as well. The importance of empathy is that you can feel all kinds of feelings, both positive and negative. And empathy is often mixed up with sympathy. Sympathy is where we feel pity and sorrow for someone else's misfortune. Sympathy is the definition of a negative emotion. It is not about understanding someone's pain as much as reacting to someone's pain. Hence, with sympathy, you never understand what a person went through. Hence, empathy is so much more complete as a concept and as a feeling. We have a better chance of connecting with someone through empathy instead of sympathy. I think empathy is a superpower that you can develop. It takes a little training, but once developed, you can see a tremendous difference in work, in relationships, and in yourself. So the 5 kinds of empathy are cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, compassionate empathy, somatic empathy, and spiritual empathy. I'm sure there are many more, but for this episode, we're going to focus only on the first 3, cognitive, emotional, and compassionate. So the first one here is cognitive empathy. And to be honest, this one isn't like how we normally think of empathy at all. It is more like taking a perspective on something. This is when we try and become the other person to figure out what they must be feeling like. We try and put ourselves in their shoes. We try and see through their eyes. Understanding someone else's perspective is a very important way of finding common ground or avenues to communicate. Cognitive empathy is used in negotiations with people. Or like we see in murder mysteries, where the lead detective says something like, "Now, if I was the butler who just killed his employer, where would I hide?" See, that is cognitive empathy. It is not actually feeling the person's feeling, it's just trying to understand logically what they must be going through. The second kind is when we classically think of as empathy. It is called emotional empathy. And this is when you can actually feel the other person's emotions as if they are your own. It is like you caught someone else's emotions. It's easy to explain with children, for example. You laugh, they laugh. If another baby starts crying, they all start crying. They have all picked up the feeling of the kids around. And it is a great way to bond with your friends using this kind of empathy. I feel learning this kind of empathy is very important, especially when something good happens to someone. Learning to share the joy and the happiness is something hard to do. It's easier to be sad with someone than to be happy with someone. So learning this from a positive perspective makes a big difference. It is also useful in forming deep friendships. In professions like doctors and nurses, it helps create that patient understanding. However, emotional empathy can be very destructive or annoying, especially if you don't have control over it. For example, a guest at a funeral who is crying uncontrollably more than the grieving family. And this often happens. Knowing when and how to use emotional empathy becomes critical. And this is where compassionate empathy comes in. In a very crude sense, compassion is equal to sympathy. Remember we discussed sympathy earlier? Sympathy plus action. Where you feel sadness and sorry for someone's situation. Where you can understand their suffering. When you move to action to help them. This combination is a great logical way of explaining compassion. Sympathy plus action. And this is the kind of empathy that most people need and want from you. They definitely don't want you to just understand. And they certainly do not want you to burst into tears with them. Instead, they want you to feel what they're going through, but also help them take action by being there for them or in any other way they need. And the beautiful thing about empathy is that it can be learned. We all have a default state of empathy. We need to realize which one it is. Then slowly start moving to any of the others that we find we need to work on. So your simple habit starts by analyzing how you reacted to someone. Was there empathy in the way you handled that situation? It can be at work, on social media, with a friend, or even with your taxi driver. Did you use empathy in that interaction? And what kind of empathy was it? Then think about how you could allow yourself to feel more. How would you use compassion more? Just this simple habit will make a huge difference in your relationships and life. I feel the world needs more compassionate empathy and more empathy as a whole. We need to transcend ourselves and start feeling what someone else does. So start these habits and share with us your progress using the hashtag #TheHabitCoach. If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to reach out to me, I am Ashdin Doc on Twitter and Instagram. You can find lots more information on my website, awesome180.com, or check out different content on my YouTube channel called AWESOME180. That's Awesome180.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money. So it's been a really, really fun week this week. We've had a great episode with Anand Nilakanthan on Cyrus Says. Anand was one of the writers of Bahubali, and it's done some really, really fun stuff since that. Ashish Vidyarthi also had a really good episode on his show, Begin the Journey. Please do check that out. You do know Yuddha is back, right? Definitely check it out if you haven't. Yuddha is our show about Indian ancient warfare. It's hosted by Anirudh Kanisetti and Aditya Ramanathan. Really, really great show. You should check that out for sure. And I forgot. Rishikesh was on the network as well. He was on Absolutely Right with Aditi Sarana. Do definitely check that out. With that, hope to see you next week.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.